welcome everybody. So being this is session 3 in our advanced topic series called Putting Insight to Work, we thought we would get Orla on, and Orla's going to be on the stage for most of today, and for a very good reason. I think you guys are going to learn some really neat things about how SAP Predictive Analytics is really different in the space. And considering I travel a lot, probably too much, according to my wife, there is usually a lot of questions in this area, right? Okay, so we could do predictive in R, we could do even do predictive in Excel, we can do predictive in SAS and IBM and all these other tools, right? What really separates you guys and makes you guys that much different? Why would I want to do it in your solution? I think for me, and I think you're going to hear from Orla today, this is one of those key areas, right? How do we put the insight into action? How do we embed? How do we incorporate and make a process or an application better? How do we generate workflows? How do we give people the means to make better decisions in the organization? And that's really what contributes to higher adoption and higher return on investment, bar none, right? It's not the fact that you got a good deal on a predictive license. It's not the fact that you're using open source. It's what are you really doing with it? And Orla's going to share some really good stuff with you today about how we do that. And I think you're going to see very clearly that this is a lot different than anything else that you've seen on the market today. Without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing and hand this over to Orla Cullen, who is our product manager for Embedded Advanced Analytics.
Okay, great. Well, that's a great introduction. Thanks for that, Mike. So just to introduce myself, my name is Orla Cullen, and I'm a product manager, part of the Advanced Analytic teams. I'm based in Dublin, Ireland, so in the SAP App House here in Dublin. And my focus has largely been on how do we embed those predictive insights back into applications. So not just SAP applications, but any applications. So what I just want to do, first of all, is maybe just set the scene a little. I know some of you have probably been to these webinars before, but just maybe give you an overview in terms of what we mean when we talk about advanced analytics. So to begin with, I think we all know we're generating a lot more data than we used to, and year on year, the amount of transactional data, conversational data, and even machine data from things like the Internet of Things is really, really growing. And what's quite important is, what are we actually going to do with all of this data? So I think traditionally with BI, business intelligence, it's been, a backward-looking type of activity, what's happened in the past to help us decipher what might happen in the future. And even more recently, looking at what's happening right now, so things about looking at, information coming from real-time data sources like, again, sensor data, giving us alerts, telling us things are going wrong or things aren't good. But even I think with advanced analytics, we want to take it that one step further, and that is, how can we decipher what is going to happen next? And with all of this data, what we're trying to do is these advanced techniques to really help us understand that. But not only just that, how do we actually use this information to influence what happens in the future? And I think by that we're saying, if we see a customer is likely to churn, what do we want to do to hang on to that customer? What do we know about them that can help us change the outcome of that situation? And I think what's most important about that as well is, it's a case of, that's great, we have these tools where we can bring together a lot of information, we can create data models, we can do a lot of advanced preparation and that type of work, but how do we get that insight back to the user or the decision maker? And I think when we talk about embedded analytics, that's really what I'm talking about. So we talked about in our previous series, we had Richard, Mike and Gaetan talk about preparing our data. So going to the data sources, looking at this large volume of data sets, bringing it together and then using it in modeling techniques. In the modeling techniques, we looked at different types of modeling we can do, and we looked at SAP Predictive Analytics 2.0, which is basically bringing together our two worlds. One is the automated world for the for the person who maybe doesn't have a PhD in mathematics, but we're also still catering to our data science community, so those people who really want to do some advanced modeling. And I think the guys touched on that quite nicely in some of the previous sessions. So what's next? How do we get the insight out of these tools and back to our customers? So today what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to go through, in both automated and expert mode, how we can actually get those insights out of our tools and back to the users who want to make the decisions. So with that, I'm going to start with our first demo. So we're going to start with our automated mode. So as many of you may know, over maybe a year and a half ago at this stage, we acquired KXDN, which is now part of the SAP Predictive Analytics family. And what was so special about KXCN was they had come up with a way of actually automating these analytic procedures. So you don't need to be a data scientist with a PhD in mathematics. You just have to understand your data and maybe an idea of the business question you want to ask. So I'm not going to spend too long going through the modeling techniques in these tools, but just setting the scene a little bit. So what I'm going to do first of all is I'm actually going to create a predictive model. So by going into our modeler, so right here you see it's not asking me for a specific algorithm type. It's just asking me what kind of model do I want to create. So I'm going to start with a classification or regression model. Now I have different data sources that I can connect to, pretty much anything from SAS, SPSS, flat files, database, Hadoop, you name it, we can connect to it. But for today's purposes, I'm actually going to use SAP HANA. So as you can see here, once I actually go to log in, it has all of the HANA systems available in my landscape. So obviously I work for SAP. You can see there I've got quite a lot of systems. And what we're going to do is just log in now. And it's going to produce for me, oh, sorry there. It's going to connect me to all the data sources that are available in my HANA system. So again, with the current version, that could be both HANA views or HANA tables, and we can pull them into our predictive model. So for today's demo, I'm going to do a churn model. So I'm going to look at some customer information, and I'm going to use that with my existing data set of customers who have churned or have not churned, and I'm going to use that to create a model, and then later on I'm going to use a data that doesn't have that information, and I'm going to show how you can apply that. I'm going to show all the different methodologies from writing back to embedding to scheduling and to scoring on the fly, and we'll go through all of these step by step. So first things first, I need to create a model. So I select my training data set, and again, because this is my automated tool, it's a wizard approach, I just click next. I analyze that data. So here the tool automatically decides what kind of values they are, so I don't need to worry about that. I want to use customer as a primary key, so I'm just going to make sure that that is known. So when I get my result, I do have a unique record that I can link my prediction back to. And next I'm going to go into my modeling screen. So as you can see here, because I selected classification, and classification is generally a binary type answer, so will churn, won't churn. In here, it is already proposed for me the variables I want to use to create the model. Now I can make some changes here, I can go into some advanced settings, but I'm just going to go with what they've proposed. It looks good to me. Okay, so again, there are some additional advanced features that I can jump into here, but for the moment I'm just going to take what the guys have given me and I'm going to go forward. I'm going to generate the model. So what this is doing now, it's looking through all of the classification models that are behind the scenes. It's applying my data, it's cutting it into training sets, it's putting it into validation sets and test sets, and it's testing all those together to come back with the best classification algorithm for me. So this is my results screen. It tells me, first of all, the number of variables that I put in and the number of variables that they actually used, the number of records that they actually went through, and also it's going to give me some indication of how powerful it is. So predictive power and predictive confidence. So those scores look pretty good, so I'm happy to keep going. So now that I have my model, what am I going to do with it? So first thing, very, very basically, I can just apply the model somewhere. So I go into my run screen and I decide to apply my model. So again, I have the option to do something, apply it directly into my HANA database. For now, I'm just going to do it as a flat file. So I'm going to save it as an Excel file. I'm going to browse my desktop. I'm going to put it in my model folder. My data set, so I have a data set waiting to be scheduled. I select that. So I decide what kind of way do I want my result to be. Do I want predictive values only? Well, actually I do, but I also want the decision, whether this person is likely to churn or not, so I can select that. So again, where do I want to write that data? Again, I could write it to HANA, but for the first case, I'm just going to show you how I can write that just to an Excel file. And again, I'm going to go into my model folder, select that. So I'm going to give it a new name called churn results. And now I can just apply that data. So again, it's shown me here some of the different target variables, some of the different classifications that have come back, and I can just click next unless I want to change something. and it's going to write that data. So first of all, it gives me the opportunity to view the output here in the tool, but I can also go to my folders, and I can see that my new churn result is here in an Excel file. So as I can see here, I have my original customer ID, and I have whether or not that person is likely to churn or not. But not only that, I have a probability. So the probability of my prediction being correct or not. So now I have this data, I could go and use this somewhere else. But we can all admit this is Excel, it's slightly basic. We want to be able to get this result to as many people as possible. So I'm going to use the exact same model. I'm going to go back into my apply screen, and this time I'm going to write it back into a data set, or into a database. So for the first scenario, I'm going to go back to the system I originally started with, which was my HANA system. So again, these are all the HANA systems available to me. I select the one that I originally started with. And I can open up the files that are available to me. So first I need to find the data set that I want to apply the data to. So in this scenario, as you can see, it is a test scenario. I have a data set created for training and a data set created for apply. Doing this in the real world, you're likely to have a view, historical view, which has the values, and you're likely to have a new view. So they're more likely to be timestamp populations rather than me creating data sets. But in the interest of it being a demo, I'm just going to do the data sets I've created. So again, I'm going to click my apply data set. So this is my data set that doesn't have any churn information. Again, I want to have a decision, and I want to actually write this into my database. So I'm going to select database. Again, I'm going to browse back to the database that I started with. Okay, so I could write that into any of these files here, but I'm going to create a new file, and I'm going to call that also churn results, but without the XLS. And again, I'm just going to apply that. Okay, so again, we see the same screen, and now it's going to write it in actually directly into the HANA database. Okay. Okay, so again, I can view it here, or I can actually go into my HANA system that I have available, and I can actually look at the document that I've created. So I've created a new table. If I need to refresh my list of tables, now I can see my churn results. So now I've got a new table in my HANA database, which could now be shared with any of my users who are using. And again, you can see my decision, you can see my probability. So already straight away, if I had any kind of a BI tool, or if I wanted to put this into an ERP system, that table is now in my HANA box, ready to be used by anybody. Okay. But that's not all we're able to do. So that's a one-off write, and that may be our scenario. Our scenario may be that it's a one-off, maybe advertising campaign, that we have a very specific one-off write scenario. But I mean, realistically, we may actually want to apply this model multiple times. So it may be something we use in our daily work. We may not want to check every day or every week or every month if our customers are likely to churn. So we do have some other options. First of all, when we go to export, we actually can just generate the source code. So here, as you can see, we've lots of different types of codes that you can possibly think of, starting with CSV, DB2, HTML, Java code, UDF for Oracle, again, lots of different SQL options. And depending on what system we want to embed this in, we can actually choose any of these source codes. I'm going to just pick Java for now, because Java is probably my language of choice. And I can save that down onto my desktop, churn model. So again, this is the model. This is not me writing any results. So this is actually a model that could be embedded into any Java-based application, or based on the code types we selected there. And also, I want to look at the generated code. So here, for all you Java people out there, you can see a very typical JavaScript here, which could be imported into any system and saved down. Okay. So that's one way of getting our code into another system and making sure that we can run it over and over again. But there are other ways. We can actually just save the model itself. And again, for this scenario, I could just do it manually. So save it as a text file. I could pop it into, again, my new model folder. And I will call it my new churn model. I can save that. And then going back in here again, We can see that my new churn model is now available. We can see my Java model, all there ready for use. But yet again, we might not want to do a whole bunch of coding to make this in there, so we do have other options. And again, we could actually look to try and save this back into HANA. So what I'm going to do is select the database. Again, go back in here. I'm going to stick with my UMM for HANA. Now I can pick, I have a model table already created, so what I'm going to do is select that model table, select OK. I'm going to give it maybe a better name than that. I'm going to call it churn model. And I'm going to save that into HANA. So as you can see, I've tested this demo before. Do I want to do it as a third version? I'm going to say no and just overwrite what's already there. Okay, so now going back into HANA, I can have a look in here to some of my models. So this is a table where I will hold all my models. And again, I'm just going to refresh that. And open that slightly, so here's the models. Okay, we want to open it up. Okay, and so we're going to search for churn. And so it's a telco churn I created earlier. But we also have churn. So it's probably down the end of the file here, but you can see the idea. Basically, all the parameters that you need are actually held in here and can actually be used for future scoring. Okay, so I've shown you now just how you can create a model in automated mode. I've shown you how you can write the result of that model back to a table and actually generate a table on the fly in HANA. I've shown you how you can export the code and embed it in pretty much any application. I've shown you how you can export the model directly into HANA. But what now I'm going to show you is also what you can do with our expert tool. So we just open our expert tool here. Again, we're going to just do it with SAP HANA. So connect to HANA. I'm using the system here. So again, it remembers my details. Connect. So again, it shows me all the available views. As you can see, this is quite a busy system, so I'm just going to do a bit of a search. I'm going to do a sales forecast. Select next. Create my data set. Okay, so as most of you have used Lumira before, we'll see something very familiar immediately. Predictive Analytics Expert Mode is reusing the Lumira code line, so things like prepare, visualize, compose, and share are rooms that are very maybe familiar to you, and they will behave the same way they do for Lumira. What's slightly different is we now have a predict room, which allows us to do some additional data manipulations. So first of all, just going to prepare room, what I'm just going to do is just make sure my billing value is actually a measure so that I can do a forecast against it. In the predict room, what you'll notice in here is we do have quite a number of algorithms. Because we are connected to SAP or HANA in online mode, all of the HANA algorithms are actually available to you. So you can see this here. What's also quite important to note is the automated algorithms that we just saw in the automated tool are also available as part of the automated predictive library in HANA. So anywhere you see auto classification, or we may have auto clustering, or again, we have auto regression down the bottom. Where we have these items, it's actually reusing that automated approach that we just used in the previous tool. So even if you are not quite an expert, you can still come into this tool and reuse some of the easier to use algorithms. If you were a little bit more advanced, then you have, as you can see here, a lot more algorithms available to you to use in this mode. So for the purposes of this one, I'm just going to use a time series. I'm going to do a bit of a forecast. I'm going to use the HANA triple exponential smoothing, and I'll explain to you in a minute why I picked that one. So it creates a new node in my chain here. What I need to do is go in and configure those settings. So for output mode, I want to forecast. I want to predict the next 12 periods. My target variable is going to be the billing value. It'll be by month. And I will start with the first period in 2005. And then I should have my predicted values. Okay, I can execute that model. Okay, Okay, so my results have been generated. Okay, so a bit of scrolling needed here, but as you can see, it has created some additional values for me. So what I can do immediately, so in terms of consuming these results, the first thing I can do, forget about exporting or writing somewhere else, I can actually visualize what I've just done. So when I go into my visualization room, I can actually just select the algorithm I've just applied. We may have done multiple. I'm going to do, because I did a forecast, I'm going to use a line chart. I'm going to make sure my predicted values are a measure so that I can show them. Bring in the original billing value. Bring in the new predicted value. I'm going to bring in, for the axis, the financial year, but also the financial month. Okay, so immediately what you can see with the blue line was my original data set, and with the green line you can see what I've predicted. So straight away, very quickly, I've taken a prediction, I've taken the result, and I've been able to visualize that in a nice, easy-to-use chart. So I mentioned earlier that I picked the triple exponential smoothing, and the reason for that is, as you can see with this data set, there is a degree of seasonality, so we see peaks and troughs throughout the year. So because I knew that that was in my data set, I picked that right. I picked that particular type of algorithm to showcase my data or make sure I get an accurate prediction. In the automated tool, I would just pick time series, and it would decide for me what the best algorithm was to use, but that's just something for you guys to be aware of. So straight away, I can go through my compose and share as I probably would with any other BI application, but there are some additional functionality I want to explain to you. So I'm going to go back into the predict room. So first of all, I have that result. What if I again just wanted to write it back into a table in HANA? So first of all, what I can do is, you can see here, we have a JDBC HANA writer, so I can just select that. I'll need to do some configuration settings. So first things first, I need to decide where I want to put it. So it assumes I'm in online mode with HANA, whatever HANA system I originally logged in with, it's keeping me logged in with. I'm going to put it into my test schema. I'm going to save it as a column store, and I'm going to call it sales forecast results. And if the table already exists, I'm going to overwrite it. So this may be where you do repeated calculations. You may want to overwrite the previous data. And I'm going to select done. Now, as you can see here, when I have actually executed any of these steps, the little ball above the node is green with the white tick, whereas white with the green tick means it's configured, but it hasn't been run yet. So I'm just going to click run. Okay, so that's been generated. Again, it'll show me the results here. But what I really want to show you is my new table in HANA. Okay, so we have tables. So already, let me just remove this filter. I'm also going to refresh that. And we're going to go see our new sales table. Sorry, it's a busy system. Okay, there's my sales forecast results. So I can open that up. And again, you can see the different financial years coming through and the predicted values over the side. So there's question marks here. It needs almost a year's worth of data to start generating the forecasted features, but you get the idea. So again, this is only really giving us this one-off scoring. So we've a visualized that we can share with people. We've done a one-off write back where we can actually have that table available. But if we wanted to have new values, we would have to rewrite that again from here. So if this is something we want to score periodically, if our HANA database potentially is a real-time HANA database where we're streaming data or replicating data real-time, we may want to be able to score on the fly. And that's something that we can do as well. So by going into the actual algorithm or the model itself, we can actually export it as a stored procedure. So again, it's going to ask me, it's kept me logged into the original HANA system. I'm going to select the schema name, which is test. I'm going to give a new procedure, so I'm going to call it sales. And that will automatically generate a view. And what happens is every time I call this view, it will generate the stored procedure behind me. So what I'm just going to call this is forecast model results. And again, I can overwrite this. So if at any point in time I felt my data was becoming out of date, I can come back here and I can re-execute that on fresher data and overwrite both the stored procedure and the view. So I'm just going to export that. Okay. So going back into HANA, I am going to show you both of those. So first of all, we're going to look at the stored procedure. So again, just to refresh the table, we should now have a brand new stored procedure. Sales forecast model. So we have that there. But not only that, we've generated a new view. So I think I generated a column view. So we'll just have a look up here. Again, just refresh that. And we should have, yeah, so we have our view, that's our sales forecast model results. And again, you know, this could be surfaced in any ERP, it could be surfaced in potentially if you were running any BI tools, this could be a view that could be incorporated. So it doesn't matter how often the data is refreshed into your HANA system, when you call this view, it will generate the latest results for you based on that model. So if you've got new transactions coming in, you know, it will update those views. So it basically gives you an idea of some quick and easy ways to get these items back in to a system. Now, I've shown you a lot of HANA. The seamless integration obviously is better with our own products, but there's no reason that these things cannot be written back into other databases or exported into other applications. Okay, so on that note, I'm just going to take a little bit of a break, and Mike's just going to go through. Hey.
Before you stop sharing, there's a question.
Yeah.
If you can show in Expert Analytics where you ran the model, if you can show just the output of the algorithm real quickly.
Sure.
So we can show like the mean squared error and that kind of stuff.
Sure.
Yep. Thank you.
Okay, so we got some of the information here, and also we have some of the trending charts as well that gets created. Does that help?
Yeah, I think that was the question.
Okay, great. Okay, so on that note, I think I'm going to pass back to Mike, who's going to go through some practical applications of what we've just discussed. So can you see my PowerPoint now?
Yes, thank you.
Lovely.
Okay, folks. So good stuff. Thank you, Orla. That's awesome, and she's going to be talking again here in just a few minutes. We just wanted to segue a little bit and get into real-world examples of how this is used. Because again, I think we like to preach about closing the loop and affecting action and all that good stuff. And sometimes customers have a hard time figuring out when and where do we do that. But we've made some logical integrations, and in some cases, we're starting to package or seed predictive licenses with some of these applications, such as fraud management and real-time situational awareness. And there's an integration between predictive and SAP Hybris marketing. Now, one might ask, why would we need that if these solutions talk about how they can do intelligence and personalized targeting and orchestration and help in channel management, right? So what we want you to think about is how our predictive analytics tool, as Orla just demonstrated to you, is a lot simpler to use, is a lot faster to use, there's a lot of automation built into it, and it produces that output to make solutions like SAP Hybris marketing that much better, right? How much better could a model be if we use historical analysis to train the model what to look for? And I'll give you an example. In Hybris marketing and e-commerce, prior to customers looking at a solution like that, I work with a lot of customers that are simply doing product association. When someone buys product A, are they buying product B? Well, let's recommend product B. There's a lot of other things that go on between product A and B that sometimes we need to capture, right? And that gets into link analysis. So our product is kind of inserted into the middle of this whole thing, right? We're listening and feeding data into it from multiple channels and different data types. And we're learning and getting smarter and looking at other paths to products and other ways that the customers interact and training it what to look for to make even a better, more smarter campaign. So that's an integration with SAP Hybris marketing, and that does exist today. Orla, if you'll go to the next slide, please.
Sure.
And then, yeah, thank you. Here's another one, or another real-world example, and this is SAP Fraud Management. And we have a lot of these. So we're just showing you 2 examples today. There's others. I mentioned real-time situational awareness. We have an integration to Cloud for Customer, right, for doing more like on the demand management side of things, doing more like lead opportunity scoring. But fraud management is another big one, and one of the earlier ones. This is an application that runs on top of HANA, and it includes a seeded license of SAP Predictive Analytics for making that model even better. We know that fraud management, although it runs on HANA and can leverage HANA's in-memory capability for doing predictive, the whole training, testing, validating, and then ongoing model management process can all be facilitated by SAP Predictive Analytics, which is more of a user tool, whereas HANA is more of a technical kind of implementation. So this is, when you think about fraud management, we want to detect fraud earlier, improve the accuracy of detection, and prevent and deter. And predictive is used throughout those steps, again, to make SAP fraud management even that much better. To go to the next slide real quickly, Orla. Thank you. Let's see, there we go. Building out, thank you. Okay,
yeah.
Here's the same application that just talks about how there's these different solutions that are or can be integrated and make the fraud management solution even that much better, such as SAP Process Control on the top that you see there for internal controls and compliance management. And then you see fraud management in the middle for doing detection, investigation, and performance analysis. Yet Predictive Analytics is doing more of the advanced pattern analysis and generating the rules, and not just the model, but the rules that go into the system that apply against new data as it comes into the system. So those are just two real-world examples. I mentioned a few more. We have lots of them. I know our solution management team and our product development team has a pretty healthy pipeline of integrations that we're working on to additional systems here at SAP. There's roughly about 50 of them that are going on right now. And our partners are working on various ones as well. And I'm sure that you'll think of things that you can integrate into as well. So thank you for that. Orla, I'll turn it back over to you.
Okay, great. Thank you. Okay, so I'm going to go back into kind of some of the demos again. So just to recap what we've been looking at, we've shown how we can create a model, write a result back. We've also shown how we can create a model and embed it into a process where it's scored potentially on the fly. And I think that covers a lot of the use cases that we've talked about in terms of, you know, things like sales forecasting, where we maybe want to write that back maybe periodically, maybe every quarter we want to do a new forecast. We've also looked at maybe training or scoring data on the fly, so things like sensor data on a machine. So it's not the kind of thing you want to wait till the end of the month to have a look at. You want to see that as it's happening and be able to look at predictions for your maintenance or where you're having as that's going. But one thing we haven't discussed just yet is how to keep your model as up to date as possible. So, you know, depending on the different business area you're working in, certain things can change over time. So, in particular, things like customer behavior. I mean, we talked a bit about churn. If we look at the telco examples, you know, churn in customers who are maybe, you know, into long-term contracts, maybe those behaviors don't change too much over time. But maybe our customers who are our pay-as-you-go, customers who are not tied into a contract, maybe their behavior changes quite quickly. So we probably need to ask ourselves the question, how often do we need to look at the models to see if they're still as accurate as they were? So do we need to go back and say, okay, well maybe this particular model was accurate 6 months ago, but right now maybe it's just a bit out of touch, and maybe what is predicted hasn't really happened. So what do we do in order to keep these models as up to date as possible? I think that's where Model Manager comes in. So I'm just going to show you a little bit about Model Manager, the Predictive Analytics tool. So first of all, I've just expired there. First of all, what we're really looking to do here is, you know, a lot of scheduling, a lot of testing, a lot of training of our models. We use a number of different concepts whereby we actually create new projects. So if we talk about what I was just working on earlier, which was telco. So we look at maybe telco as a type of project that we want to run. What if we had a central cockpit whereby we could look at all of the data we wanted to analyze, we could look at all of the models that we built, and potentially we can just automate and schedule how that runs. So what I'm going to just show you quickly is how that can be actually done in Model Manager. So the first thing I just showed you the overview. It's quite simple, just creating a a project. You maybe assign some managers, some users. As you can see, it's all just admin, it's me at the moment. But you could have different people having different roles within your organization. Some people might be responsible for the importing of models. You may have a DBA who's responsible for connecting systems. Whatever you may choose, this is something that is configurable within the tool. So if we first of all look at the sources that I've assigned, first of all, we have the text file that I created from my desktop earlier, so my new models, as you may have seen. We also have the HANA system that we've been working on, some of the models that we've created there. So those are now connected to this project, and we can actually avail of all of the models and of the data sets that sit in those data sources. So the first thing I'm going to actually try and do is I'm going to import a model. So to start with, I'm actually going to go into the folder on my desk, and as you can see, as you remember, I created this a little bit earlier. So what I can just do is select that, click Next. I can give it a new name, or I can give it some more details. I also can decide what performance indicators that I want to have activated on this model. For today's purposes, I'm not going to go through them all. I'm just going to say we're going to select them all, and we're going to complete. So that is now a model that is available to me in that project. So that's one that I've taken from my desktop. What about the ones that we've just created and we imported into HANA? How can we make sure that within Predictive Analytics we can actually reference those? So what's slightly different here is I'm not physically going to load the model back into Model Management. I'm just going to really connect to it so that if I schedule any tasks further down the line, we can connect to HANA. It will point to the model that I've created, and we can then bring it forward. Okay. So the model that I had created was the churn model. So we'll just take this one here. Again, select Next. We just call it churn model 1, my churn model. Again, we will select, I'll leave these blank for now, and we will load that. So now we have a number of models loaded in our project. We can start now to decide that we want to do some tasks. So what are the kind of tasks that you might want to do? So the first one, very basically, would be to schedule a task. So in the first scenario where you saw I had just a model held on my desktop with the data set, you might want to schedule that. Obviously, we have a scheduler in HANA, so if we want to do scheduling, we can do it there. But either way, we could do an apply a model here. We can either pick the model in HANA or the model on my desktop. Either way, it will connect to wherever the source is. For this purpose, I'll just connect the one from my desktop. I need to connect a source. So again, I'm going to click My New Models. It's going to want the application data set. So I'm going to select that there. Again, the source name is My New Models. And we can create an output data set. So we can call churn results model manager. And again, if it already exists, we can choose to overwrite it. We can have predict values only or what have you. And we can schedule that to run. So here we have, this is quite typical. You might see something like this in most systems. You might want to execute it once. You might want to do it as a scheduled task periodically. Or you may want to schedule it after another task or after an event, and I'll explain why that's important in just a second. But for these purposes, I can just schedule it to run immediately. Okay, and again, we can see the task is here. We can go run now, and that will run that for me. And again, I have notification managers and all of the rest up here. That will generate a new file on my desktop. But that's just one of the many things you can do here. What's actually probably more important is if we look at some of the more complicated tasks that we could actually configure. These could be things like, again, a deviation test. So what a deviation test is, it actually looks at the model. It compares it to the latest data set that's available, and it tries to have a look at, based on what's been predicted, how much of that was correct. And it will give you normally a value, a percentage value, and you can decide a threshold whereby that is good enough or not. So if we were just to set, we will do this here quite quickly. We're going to connect to HANA. We're going to pick our application data source. Churn type. And we may want a comparison report. So what that's going to do is we're going to ask that to go ahead and schedule that immediately. And it's going to call that test my HANA model. So it's going to test that to see how relevant it still is. And again, I'm going to schedule that to run, schedule that task to run now. But what I could do is build up a stream of tasks, and that could be something along the lines of, I'm first of all going to create a deviation analysis. If the deviation analysis is successful, sorry, actually this one I'm going to do a retrain. And, okay. Again, just to fill in some of these fields. So you'll see now it'll allow me to recompute, keep initial, we go to next. So when I go to schedule, I can actually schedule this after another task. So what I might say is, okay, well, based on the success or failure of my deviation analysis, kick off a retraining. So if I find it's below maybe 90%, it's not good enough, I want it to go back, I want it to retrain the model. When it retrains the model, I can then subsequently schedule and apply at that event. So thereby, this all can happen in, without me really getting too involved. I can have this all set up to run weekly, daily, monthly, whatever your schedule might be. And at the end of the day, I have my overview, which tells me what's been successful, what has failed, and all the notifications that are available here. And as you can see here, it comes back and tells me these have gone successfully, these will have created new tables within my HANA system, or created a new file directly on my folder. So depending on your scenario, you can schedule as many or as little of these jobs or projects to run, whereby you can bring all this stuff together. Okay. So that's just an idea of what Model Manager does and why it's so important. So just going back to the slide deck quickly. So this is just the last slide, and I wanted to bring together, we did talk about how we can write back to pretty much any database, and we talked about how we can export pretty much any type of code, but really talking again about what Mike mentioned about closing the loop. I just want to go through the entire advanced analytics portfolio we have, particularly when we're talking about HANA. So again, we have the three types of users that we expect to have. We have our data scientists, the guy who has our PhD in mathematics. We have our business analyst, who again is quite strong with the data science, but also maybe knows his business very well. He maybe comes from a financial or sales background. And then we have our line of business users. These are our decision makers, and whether that's a decision maker deciding how much cash flow we need to have for the next few months, or if it's somebody in a call center making a recommendation for the next best offer to a customer. Each of those people, we need to join the dots. So how can the impact of the data scientist and business analyst get back into the business user? So if we look just below the line into what we consider the advanced analytics portfolio, we have Predictive Analytics 2.0, and as I mentioned earlier, this is where we've brought together the automated and the expert mode. Each of them can use either tool. They can generate predictive models, and we can use the model manager for HANA or for any other system to actually join those items seamlessly into any HANA-based business application or analytical application. So I've written APL in brackets down there because that's currently what's available. We obviously, for future reasons, will be looking into other libraries, but today APL is fully available. But the data scientist can essentially get an insight to a business user without the interference of an IT or development person. Now, we're not saying there aren't complex scenarios where you may want to embed that into an analytical application, but we're just saying if you were to create a simple view, just like we did today, you can actually make that available to any of your line of business users. And we think that that's what's most powerful about this tool. Throughout today, you saw me create models and get them into HANA. Not once did I write a line of SQL, and this is something that we can enable our data scientists, business analysts, and business users to do. Okay, and then just the final thing I wanted to mention was, you probably noticed that Model Manager looks slightly different to the predictive analytic tools, so just to make you aware, something that we're working on in the next few months is actually coming together with the next generation user interface. So this means all the tools will look a bit more like each other. The functionality you've seen today works quite well, but the user experience is something that we're key to work upon. But by the end of the year, we would hope to have everything together whereby this could be done in one repository. Okay. So that is largely what I had to go through in terms of demos and tasks. Do we want to spend some time taking some questions? I saw one there just about in database apply for HANA inherently using APL for HANA. So for the model manager at this point in time, the answer is yes, but it's something we'll be extending in the future. However, in the expert mode, like I showed you earlier, that can be written for both for APL and for PAL. So I noticed people mentioning that Lumira doesn't have the predict room. Although we are sharing the code line, the predictive analytics product is actually a separate product. So it doesn't come as standard with Lumira. So I'm seeing here, is it possible to update the source table with the predictive results, or does it have to be a new table? That's a good question. Depends on how you configure the original table. If the original table has got columns to accept predictive values, then you can do that. If you want to do it on the fly, it has to be a new table. So one of the things that we do, Raoul, with them, particularly with Hybris, is when we set up the tables to be used in the predictive scenarios, there is a few fields made available for things like scoring and for different scoring equations. So that would be a config step if you wanted it to be all in the one table. However, if you want to generate it on the fly, it will be a new table. And you can, of course, overwrite the new table with future predictions. The other thing we see people doing quite a bit is actually creating views whereby the source table is joined with a number of different predictive scenarios, and that could be particularly prevalent for something like customer. So you may have something like churn, but you may also have different algorithms like recommendation, where you may want to see the next best offer. And we have seen in some scenarios how that can be joined, multiple tables can be joined like that in a view, particularly in a CRM type scenario.
There's still some questions around the details of the algorithm.
Yeah.
And I forgot, Orla, in your example, you were using HANA, so we'd have to go to HANA to see the code, right, behind that?
That's true, yes. I mean, that's correct.
If you're doing a local algorithm in expert mode, you can actually see the summary results and how it was calculated, but not the actual code of the algorithm itself.
Unfortunately not. However, if you were to write your own R scripts, you can actually embed those directly in the tool, and you can look at the code. You can even customize the code in a script editor if you choose to. PAL and APL are pre-configured libraries available to you, but what I probably didn't show in expert, and I can show very quickly, is we do have the ability to import our components, and there is a script editor which allows you to do that or import it from somewhere else. So you could actually write your code here or import it. So that is another way where you can do that, and it's actually been an interesting development whereby sometimes we have customers who use third parties to create. They don't have data scientists on staff who may create R scripts for them. They can import those R scripts into Expert and still do the work that you just saw me do there. So what's the difference between Lumira and Predictive Analytics is the new name. So Lumira is largely a visualization tool used kind of more in the business intelligence space. Predictive Analytics is taking things a step further and allows you to configure predictive algorithms. It's not something that we would have available in Lumira, and there is some interoperability. But as I said, predictive is generally for your business analyst / data scientist.
And Lumira is really positioned as a self-discovery for data and for really visualizing the existing data, creating infographics and stories. So there's slightly different focus in the products.
And there's a question about, can we replace Lumira with predictive? And I mean, they serve two different purposes. You know, for purposes of today's discussion, think of Lumira as being OEM'd into predictive analytics for the foreseeable future. We don't know if that will continue at this point. It will continue. We just don't know for how long. So, you know, Lumira serves its purpose. Lumira, as part of the presentation, being able to build storyboards is why it's available inside of Expert Analytics. If you have a big community base of Lumira, we don't want to necessarily take that away from them, but we can enrich their experience if you go the predictive analytics route and allow them to do more advanced things. But they are not on the exact same code line, so that would be my first response to, can we simply replace Lumira with predictive? Probably not, would be the right answer.
And I suppose the other thing to mention would be, and often how I describe it is, you know, if you're in a finance department, not everybody is doing the planning or the forecasting, but everybody's probably consuming the results. So what we would position is that predictive would be the tool where you create those insights, but Lumira may be where you consume them. So as you saw earlier, I created a view. The view had both the source data and the predicted columns, and maybe that was something that a Lumira user could surface in Lumira and do their visualizations and whatever they wanted to do with that. They don't necessarily need to understand the algorithms that generate the scores.
And of course, we have a number of different Lumira products. Lumira is just more kind of a family name, if you want. We have Lumira editions for desktop, for HANA, for BIP. We have BW integration. So there's a number of products inside the Lumira family.
Yeah, and Frank's got another follow-up question on that. Is the predictive room available in Lumira, or is it dependent on having SAP PA? It's dependent on having predictive analytics. on the expert side of the platform. There are a couple, I would label them as lightweight predictive capabilities built into Lumira today, Lumira standalone, and that's for time series forecasting and linear regression. So you can drag and drop those onto analysis, and they are again very lightweight, and there's very little control over the output of those. So it's drag and drop kind of functionality. Users that want more would need to go, migrate over to predictive analytics.
We have no more questions, and I would suggest we are closing the call then. Thank you very much, Ola and Mike, for this excellent presentation. And with that, thank you everyone, and hopefully see you next time online on the webinar.